Hello everybody and welcome. I was going through some images the other day and looking at the ones that I have created over the period of this terrible virus we've had during lockdown, and also the times that we could get out and were allowed to. And I think I have probably created some of my favourite images in this period of time. Now, whether that's due to being locked up at home and just playing around with images on the computer, I really don't know. But what I thought I would like to do is run through a few of those images with you to explain where I got them and how I created them. And I would like to hear your comments on them also. I think when we're pushed into a corner, it can bring out the creativeness in us. On the other hand, it can have the adverse effect of not being able to create. I think it all depends on your frame of mind. So let's have a look at the first image. Now, this image was created back last winter, when we were allowed out after quite a lengthy lockdown, and it was an absolutely freezing cold day. I only managed to stay out for about half an hour, and I ended up not being able to feel my feet or my fingers. But I took the dog for a walk in an area that I know, which you get very few people, which I thought was a good idea in the times we were living. And I noticed this frozen muddy puddle that had got broken through people walking through it. And I absolutely loved the shapes of the ice that this had created. So I took quite a few shots, and I came back and I played around with the colours until I ended up with this, and I absolutely loved this image. It almost is like the ice is dancing to me. So yep, that was an image that I was really happy with, and it was an absolute joy to be able to get out in the fresh air, even though it was absolutely freezing cold. Now, this image, I actually took it about 2, maybe 3 years ago, of some sailing boats moored up in Christchurch Harbour. And it was an image that I dismissed at the time because I didn't think it was sort of worthy of doing anything with. But during lockdown and plenty of time on my hands, I was going through all my archive files. And I picked this one out and thought I would just play around with it to see what I could do. And it's actually got a textured background layered into it. And I just played around with the various colour tones on it. And I ended up with an image that I was really pleased with. So it just goes to show, never ever delete your files, because you can easily come back to them later. And you may look at them in a different light, whether you've a different frame of mind, or you may even just have found some new editing software that you can utilize for the image. So that is a lesson that I think is worthwhile, is to never delete your images. Now, this image again is one that I took 2 or 3 years ago, of some people walking down by the Riverside in Christchurch, and I actually made an image of this at the time, but I was never really very happy with it, and I had found a new setting in iColorama that I really liked, and I thought I would try it on this image, and it ended up turning it into an image that I was very pleased with. So, as I was saying in the last image, you can very often come across new editing software that you can utilize for images that probably at the time you didn't think particularly were that special. So again, this is one that was done in lockdown, utilizing the time that I had on my hands. I think probably one of the hardest things, certainly with this type of photography, or it may be the case for any type of photography really, especially with landscapes, is thinking of new ideas. And sometimes you can get this real mental block and you're not being able to create anything of any significance. I did go through that patch during the last year, but I was walking the dog one day just locally and it had been pouring with rain, and I looked in a puddle and saw this reflection of the trees, and I thought that might make for a good image. So when we were allowed out, I actually went down to a river in the New Forest and I took some images of the reflections of the trees in the stream or the river. And this particular one, it was actually the water flowing over some rocks, which was giving it, the water, this beautiful texture. And I had the reflection of this tree and the bush. So I took some shots of it and brought it back and just tweaked the colours, because when you take the image of the reflection, there's really no colours to speak of in it. It tends to be very grey, so you have to sort of play around with the colours to get an image that's pleasing. The other thing is, when you're taking some images of reflections, you need to focus on through the water into the reflection rather than the surface of the water itself. So that's something that's sort of worth bearing in mind. But I was really pleased with the final images that I managed to create through these reflections, and I think possibly this one is my favourite. I don't normally take pictures of animals, but while we were in lockdown and restricted to where we could go, I'm very lucky to live on a farm with various animals. There's horses and goats and geese, and I thought I would take some images of one of these miniature horses, and I just wanted to capture their head, or his head. It was very difficult because he didn't particularly like his photograph being taken, so he kept sort of running away, and it probably took a couple of 100 shots to get this image. I played around with the textures in iColorama until I ended up with this image that I was very pleased with. I suppose the lesson to be learnt here is, when you are restricted to certain areas, you have to try and find something local to you to photograph, just to keep the interest going. And at the end of the day, I ended up with an image that I probably otherwise wouldn't have taken. I don't normally take pictures of people, or certainly not very much, but I went to an overcliff near me and I thought I would try and get some images of some people walking past, and the whole idea was to not have them in focus, so I defocused them slightly, and I used a long lens because I get very self-conscious taking pictures of people. So if you've got a long lens, then you can sort of isolate yourself from them and they don't know that you're actually taking their picture. And I sat on the grass with the camera actually resting on the ground, so it was tending to look up into the sky. I didn't want to get any sort of background in. I just wanted the people on their own. And after a couple of 100 images, I ended up with this one, and I absolutely love this image. It's one of my favorites. the fact that it was defocused gave her this beautiful shape, and she was looking down as well, which I think just made the image. And I put a textured background in it, which I was able to do because I didn't have anything in the background other than it was a sort of grey sky day. And I ended up with this beautiful image, as I say, that has ended up probably being one of my favourite of the year. This image I had in my head for quite some time that I wanted to try and capture, and this was inspired by an image I saw of Valda Bailey's. If you haven't seen her work, it's a good idea to have a look at it. It's just amazing work that she does. But this was taken at Hythe Marina in Southampton, and he was looking across the water at the docks on the other side of the river, and we had some cruise liners that were going nowhere because of COVID, and I had this red funnel ferry entering the image from the right hand side, and I loved the pastel-y colours that I ended up getting with this and the effect of the reflections in the water. So this was something that I was really pleased with, and I had, as I say, in my head to take for quite some months. So yeah, that was a very pleasing image in very hard times. This was actually an image of some trees, some silver birch trees in the New Forest, which I probably took a couple of years ago. And I loved the image at the time, but I actually, in lockdown, thought I would play around with it, and I ended up blending another image over the top of it, which had been taken of the wetlands in Hamworthy, and I ended up with this image, which again I was very pleased with. And I actually had a customer who purchased both images when he got the prints. He emailed me and said that he didn't realise until he got them that they were the same image but just edited in a different way. And he actually said that he loved the pair together. They just seem to fit together, and I agree with him actually. I think they do. And it's always very nice when you sell a print and someone is really, really happy with them. To me, that means so much. This was an image that was created through having time on our hands and playing around with the images that we have already. And it's one that I do particularly like. I'm going to make this one my penultimate one because I'm sure you're all getting bored stiff. But this again was taken a few months ago down by the river in the New Forest where I took the reflections. And this probably is not my usual style. It's not as abstract as many of my images, but I did play around with it in iColorama. And I love the softness of the background. I love the reflection in the water and the colour tones that I ended up getting. So as I say, this is something probably a little bit out of the norm for me. It is a little bit on the abstract side, but it was an image which I thought was worthy of keeping. One that I was quite pleased with at the end of the day. But it was just lovely to be able to get out, go for a walk, and if you go down to this river, once you get away from the car park, you don't see a soul. You can be on your own all day long, which to me is absolute heaven. So yeah, this is an image which reminds me of a lovely day out. This is going to be my final one, and strangely enough, this was created out of pretty much nothing. I've been struggling in the last couple of weeks with creativity, and ideas, which I know that we all go through, especially in these times. And I've taken some images of some woodlands, and nothing that I did with them seemed to develop into anything that I liked. But I did actually use a setting in iColorama which turned the image of the woodlands into, how can I explain it? It was like a painterly cubism, if you like. And I quite liked it on its own, but it needed something more. So I continued to play around with some settings, and one of the settings turned the image into this, I don't know, it's almost sort of like water effect. I think that's probably the best way I can explain it. And I actually took an image of a flower which I'd taken quite a few years ago when I used to do flower photography, and I overlaid that into the image and ended up with this. And I was actually really pleased with the final outcome. It really boosts your enthusiasm when you can actually create an image from pretty well nothing, and also when you're in a bit of a downer creativity wise. So I was really pleased with this image at the end of the day, and as I say, it was something that was made up from pretty much nothing. Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed seeing some images that I've been able to make through these hard times that we've all gone through. And sometimes situations can actually help towards creativity. I think that's looking on the positive side of things. Now, I wasn't really too sure about doing what I'm about to explain to you. I don't actually make any money out of making these videos. I don't even get anything off YouTube for it. I do it because I like sharing my images. I like sharing my thoughts with all you people. I like the fact that maybe I can inspire you and give you ideas. And I am always very willing to answer any questions that you have via email or even by phone. I have done in the past to try and encourage you to try this sort of photography for yourself. And it's always very nice to get comments, and I really do like helping people with their journey of abstract photography. So I noticed that a lot of YouTube videos or YouTube videographers, if you like, or bloggers as we're called, do have a coffee fund and people can donate whatever they like for a cup of coffee or whatever, just as a way to say thank you and a little help financially along the way to make these videos, because they do take a lot of time and a lot of effort making. So I thought, well, if everybody else is doing it, I don't really see a problem with it, because obviously you don't have to. But if you do feel like buy me a cup of coffee, there is going to be a link below to it. And it's very much appreciated. And as I say, if I can be of any help to any of you out there, I am always more than willing to do so. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. As I say, I hope you've enjoyed this little video. Until the next time, this is John Dexter saying bye for now.